Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to talk to you about some growing problems within the ROK community. These are not new problems per se, but they have been within the game for quite a while, and they can continue to grow and be a part of the day-to-day experience for people that ultimately ruins or negatively impacts their experience of the game. Now, those of you who are RTS players within the community might recognize this icon, which is basically a crypt tumor from StarCraft 2. And this is basically what I classify these problems as. They are tumors that keep growing and keeps festering within the community, ultimately results in a bad and negative experience of the game. Here I've taken a AI generated picture of basically some great buildings that are being corrupted and taken over by these tumors. Ultimately, ROK is a great game. It has great potential and has delivered great experiences and will continue to do so. However, it gets dampened by these negative experiences from these tumors. These tumors are things that will ultimately deter people from the game and the community and ultimately spending money on the game, which basically negatively impacts Lilith's profit margins. These tumors are things like cheating in terms of scripting and botting. They ultimately create a unfair advantage in both the RSS department and the micro department of the game, which once you know about it and you have either used it yourself or seen other people use it, you realize just how big of a game it is to have it on your side versus not. Also having pilots through account sharing, non-stop, accounts going 24/7. This is not a new thing at all. People have been doing this for years, and it is basically the expected thing in some kingdoms and some communities. If you cannot play, you will have a pilot, or you will pay someone to play on your account. If you don't do it, you're gonna lose to the kingdoms that do. And if you refuse to do it, you might even be shunned from your community. And we have RSS selling and buying, which is something that Lilith themselves could easily address and do themselves and sell more of, because frankly this exists because there's a demand for lower prices than what Lilith sells. But ultimately also has become a part of the war economy of the game. But the biggest of them all is the lack of rule enforcement. People do these things and get away with it, which then makes more people want to do it because, well, if we don't do it, we're going to lose to it. Because our enemies are doing it, so why shouldn't we? That's basically the mentality that goes around. And we had first-hand experience with a bunch of this at KVK against one of the bigger champions of the game, and basically won Osiris League for one of the rounds, which is 27-48. Now, I'm putting the whole alliance slash kingdom on full blast here because it seems to be a widespread issue within their community where it basically is the mentality of like, hey, it's a mobile game, so it's okay to cheat. Well, if we don't cheat, somebody else is gonna. Oh, and we're basically getting money or saving money, spending on bundles, so that's why we're botting so that we can get gems, because you know that's fair game, according to them. So what I will go over is some pros and cons to the cheating here, as you can see on the right side, because ultimately everything isn't just black and white, and you have people who will look at things like this and experience it, be on the receiving end of cheating, and they will consider doing it themselves. This is the benefit side. We're starting with the pros, which is increased engagement from cheaters. Because if they get away with it, you know, they can continue to play, continue to be involved, continue to bully people that don't cheat, and they have a greater experience. Whereas everybody, you know, they like winning. Winning is fun, right? They get the extra resources to continue fighting, the extra gems I was talking about earlier. They have more speed ups, and they have more honor and other event items that basically put them at an advantage compared to everybody else. They have the ability to increase their stats through, for example, the gem gathering with materials. They can then upgrade their gear, which then gives them an advantage. They can max some of the events because of it. And they also then spend more money, possibly. Sometimes, or some would argue that because they're cheating, they're not going to spend as much. And then there's others who are like, well, I'm cheating, I'm getting these benefits, so I'm going to invest even more. So I might spend some more time, money, energy on the game to then also further their accounts to widen the gap of advantage compared to people who don't spend and cheat. And then you have the mentality of the spending part, where it's like you spend money on the game, already the company's looking at the other side, so I can continue to cheat because I spent money, so it's fair. Which obviously is not a good mentality to have, but it seems to be a quite widespread one in 2748. They have people who have Charles Martel support and basically thought that, hey, because I have Charles Martel support, I can get away with it. The worst I'll get is a slap on the wrist of being said, basically, don't cheat. Like, I would rather rephrase that as, don't get caught next time. Because that is basically the warning that they got, not in exact words, but that is what the slap on the wrist is basically telling them. So being like, if you're gonna cheat, be smart about it, so we don't ever have to hear about it. Now the cons. The loss of engagement from legitimate players. We are losing players to this. In fact, our community, I've had players quit. I almost quit myself. We had leadership who was really torn on if they should continue playing the game or not. And we had players who were like, I'm done after this KVK, because clearly the developers don't care about it, the community and the good experience of people who don't cheat, so why should we? The integrity of the game and whatever you accomplish is basically diminished, because if people are cheating, well, and they get away with it, what does it mean to accomplish anything? What does it matter to get X amount of kill points in the game? What does it matter to have good gear in the game, good commanders, even to have stars on your kingdom and the team? What does that mean or matter when somebody can cheat and accomplish the same thing? It basically becomes worthless. You don't feel like it has any value at all. And at that point, there's very little reason to continue playing the game. You then also, because of that, have a reduced investment from these players. I know for a fact that I reduced my spending and almost considered quitting with chargebacks because of this. And that is basically the recommendation that I will proceed with giving to people who run into this and they have their community breakdown. It's basically charge back your whatever you can, or sell your account. Again, breaking the terms of service, but that is doesn't matter because the company doesn't care, right? So cash out whilst you can and get out, rather than dealing with a fraudulent company that allows people to cheat. And you can get away and have more time for yourself, your friends, your family, because frankly, it takes up a lot of our time. Now, for some people, it is for the better, and you get to meet a lot of great people, you get to have some really good experiences. But ultimately, we're here to have friends, good experiences, and enjoying it together. But when people are allowed to get away with cheating, we feel like that doesn't matter. Like, why are we working towards something when it holds no value to us anymore. And at that point, you're gonna end up having only cheaters versus cheaters. And if I learned anything from cheaters in games, is that most of them don't want an equal playing field. They don't want to run into other cheaters. But hey, they they'll enjoy that part when they get to it, because the game's problem has been that widespread. Now, I will also say that when it comes to the cheating allegations, or actually proved towards 2748, I will link that in the description to an Excel sheet that I've made, which basically has recordings of things and comments, because nothing was done towards these players beforehand, which basically means that either Lilith was aware of it and didn't do anything about it, or they weren't aware of it and their anti-cheat basically doesn't work, because they have shown us that they don't take actions unless reported. And I'll also say, when it comes to the accomplished part, is that cheaters shouldn't be allowed to compete. If you are convicted of cheating in this game, whether it's botting, account sharing, RSS buying and selling, or any other injection sheet or whatever, you should not be allowed to compete in the competitive parts of the game, whether it's Champions of Olympia or it's the Cyrus League. You should be permanently banned from that, because it doesn't feel great going up against cheaters in these game modes, where you have to work not only hard for your account's progress, but also your team coordination, and possibly thinking all the time, like, hey, am I going up against someone in Ark of Osiris who has map hack that can see our marches? Am I going up against someone who cheated their way to their gear in the game, that botted basically 3 to 4,000 gems per day for a year? Meanwhile, I had to spend money to get there, or just do the manual gathering myself. Always having that in the back of your head is not a good experience to go through, basically, because you will always have that second guessing of, like, did I lose fair and square, or did I win fair and square? Because you get people on your team that is cheating as well, and being like, well, have they stopped cheating after we confronted them, or have they continued? Things like that. Now, I will go into a little bit about the account sharing and piloting situation, for a little bit of the pros and cons to this. And we'll start with the pros again. You have the higher uptime from a kingdom perspective, which obviously helps you win KVKs. And this is also beneficial from an account standpoint, not only the kingdom, and also it looks good from, I guess, a shareholder perspective of active accounts, right? More accounts being used, even if it's farm or alt accounts, whatever. You then have the added bonus of these accounts being active, basically easier to retain territory or push during enemy downtime, because you have those extra bodies on the field, or you have extra bodies on your downtime to basically hold on to your territory. Everybody gets more kills and rewards, is to say. Now, it doesn't always mean that you actually get more kills and rewards, because you might steamroll enemies so hard that they pull out and don't feel like it's worth it. You get more KVK wins, you get more stars, you get more of a name within the community, which, everybody likes the seasonal conquest points to progress their account and things like that. You have the safe to someone else being able to log into your account if you're risking being zeroed. Sometimes people fall asleep, things like that, and it could be helpful if you have a friend who can log onto your account and move it, which has saved a lot of people, but it has also compromised other people's account. And when it comes to having your city safe, we all enjoy having a normal sleeping schedule. So when you feel like it's getting late, guys, I need to have some rest, you can go to bed and your pilot will take over, which obviously, you're getting account stat increases whilst you don't have to do anything and you can just sleep. Sounds good, right? Who wouldn't want to be able to basically either pay a bit of money or have a friend basically stat boost you? You didn't earn it because you didn't work for it, other than you might have paid for the resources and gotten the account there. You didn't actually do the fighting yourself, but hey, you got the stats, and that's what a lot of people care about in this community. Look at the numbers, not the player, not the skill. Just look at what numbers they're able to pull, which does require some skill in some regards, but it's also could just be completely done by not even the owner of the account. Now, the cons is basically the accounts being risked. That there is sometimes people who, especially in early kingdoms, have whale accounts go rogue. Somebody that isn't supposed to, or gets upset, uses that account to roll over people, causing some bad experiences through sniping MGEs, zeroing someone they don't like. It could happen in the SOC kingdoms as well. And it absolutely ruins kingdoms. And also, as I said earlier, you could have a kingdom that has a rule of like you have to have a pilot, and if you don't, well, then please get one, or you're not welcome here. Then you have, I was touching about earlier, the stats basically mean less. Frankly, mentality matters a lot more now when you look at recruiting. But when you see someone with 20 or 10, 20, 30, 50 billion kill points, at this point it's like, okay, so how much is this is brute force? How much of this is just pilots? Because I can tell you, having fought against bigger kingdoms, I've fought against 365, I've fought with 365 versus 1960 versus 1093. There are definitely players where their pilots are running it down over and over again, and they can afford to do it. But when you look at their stats and you know how those pilots fights, it's like, okay, this is just sad. The follow-up to that is that when you do get your stats, or when you don't get your stats, you have to do it yourself, sorry. You are basically putting in all of this time and effort towards an account that you want to play with, that you want to have fun with, but ultimately, because the necessary piloting within the game, you have to hand that off to someone else. And I can tell you, as someone who has spent a fair bit of money on my account, as well as a lot of time and effort in terms of grinding, I don't want someone else to enjoy the raw power of the account, because I worked for it. If they want to enjoy it, I would have preferred if they worked for it themselves, so they could fight side by side, so they know the weight of the actions they are taking. Because not everybody knows what it takes to run an account on full force for a whole KVK. People think that whales can just go forever, or they think that somebody who buys some crystal tech or something, they have the ability to continue to go forever. I can tell you, without the proper farm support or resource buying, you can't. You're gonna run out real quick if you go full throttle from the get-go. Frankly, it is going full throttle that is fun, but you can't. You have to hold back or let somebody else do it, and then you're sitting there having to like realize that you don't actually get to enjoy playing the game because somebody else is doing it. And when you have time to enjoy it, your account might be in a worse state than what you would have liked, so you have to hold back because you have to pace yourself in a KVK. And then you're again not enjoying the hard work of your off season because you had up somebody pilot your account and they went a little bit too hard before Kingsland. And then the follow up to this, if you don't have someone doing this on your account, you have the mentality of unfight them, join them. So you either account share and win, or don't and severely risk losing to it. This has been a thing since, for me, KVK1, where people ask to get access to your account, or they want you to give access to someone else so that you always, or your kingdom always, have a rally or garrison lead available non-stop, or just have field presence of one of the bigger accounts to plow through the field, because if you don't have field, you can't accomplish much. Now, there's a bit of a mix in between this. That is basically increased or decreased cost on individual accounts in KVK. And this is, again, if you steamroll your enemy so hard that they give up too early, you're actually saving resources and speed ups and gems, because, well, they realize that you're just overpowering them so hard, so why should they even bother? But you can also have situations where the reverse is true, where you're trying so hard, even with account sharing, that you're running into a wall and your accounts end up being so drained that you can't accomplish much. All for, well, most likely somebody else to enjoy and not you, if you involving yourself in this practice. And I will actually cover a little bit about like the resource cost and stuff like that, numbers here, for people to have a bit of a reference for what it takes to heal and what it can cost, and give people a general understanding of, hey, just because somebody maxes tech in KVK, it doesn't mean that they can afford to have a pilot on 24/7 or to um, keep their accounts going forever. So these are some of the numbers that I've pulled with some help from some friends in terms of buying resources and some healing references of what healing with brands as a civ is worth and KD buff, and then with tech, without tech, because ultimately spenders in this game have a bigger advantage when it comes to reaching the healing techs faster. And I know that there's going to be people in the comments who probably say like, hey, I can get resources for cheaper than this, or I can this and that. Like, this is some rough numbers that I've pulled with asking some friends questions. Doesn't mean that they are 100% accurate to your situation. This is just for you to have a reference points on what you could expect from the people you're playing with, or your whales, friends, or your foes, if you know that they are involving themselves in resource and selling practices. And also, maybe if you're going to start selling resources, you know what to charge for it. Because, frankly, not all kingdoms have the same prices. And this is based on 100 million troops, which for some people, that's ludicrous. That's a lot of troops in a KVK. For other people, this is going to be basically nothing. I heal double or triple that in KVK. And for you, if you do that, then great. But it also costs a lot. And for some people, these are full wages that will be spent on just resources. It doesn't include any gear, it doesn't include any armament spending, no tech. It's just cough off. You have the resources if you refuse to run farms by yourself. So with this, I have in my example here is at maximum 60 billion resources, whereas, or 68 billion, sorry, and the lowest is 36 billion resources. Best case scenario in healing. There's a big difference. So obviously, the later you heal in KVK, the better, because you can sustain it for longer. Zone 5 fighting is often some of the worst fighting you can ever have in a KVK, if you are not the winning side. If you are steamrolling and you're outnumbering and you're having great trades, then great, continue. Push the advantage and run them over, because you're ultimately going to be draining your enemies harder than they are draining you. If you're not, you're going to sit there with a fat hospital bill and wonder where all of your resources went. And it could end up being that you're paying almost 2k for a KVK's worth. Now, if you're a T4 player, it's obviously going to be less, and I have some of those numbers down here as well. And the sheer amount of speed ups in terms of days, it's a lot of speed ups. And you're gonna have to recover that somehow, or you're gonna have to sit on the bench and not have fun with everybody else, right? And everybody wants to partake in these fights, so we make sure to have the resources. But running these accounts to have the resources, I made an assumption of that you're making 30 million resources per day. So give or take, more or less depending on what you farm. But it's, I think, a fair estimate, and it's gonna take a long time for you to, worst case scenario, then have these type of resources to pull these type of numbers. And I 100% understand it. Some KVKs are not gonna be this bad. Some of them are gonna be worse. But it's a lot of farming to be able to basically run your account out of speedups or run them out of resources. But running yourself out of resources is quite easy. Don't farm and you'll run out really quickly. So basically this is me saying that we have a resource problem in the game that is partially addressed by buying resources, but frankly we shouldn't have this big of a problem with resources and healing, because ultimately this is virtual items currency that Lilith can tweak, and I think most people would have a better experience if healing within the game was cheaper at a baseline, not through KVK tech, just baseline, not have to break their backs to keep a T5 account running. Now, the one thing that is problematic with this as well, or selling and buying, is some people get away with it, and some people don't. Some people have their resources confiscated, and other people they don't, which then creates an unfair advantage, right? And people don't like that. It would suck for you to basically buy 68 billion resources and have it confiscated by Lilith, whereas your friend or even your enemies can clearly see that they're buying resources and you don't have them confiscated. And that comes into the lack of rule enforcement or lack of consistent application, where the lack of enforcement results in lack of integrity and trust in the game. Cheating and exploiting and TOS breaking becomes the rule and not the exception. Where, frankly, I think top tier kingdoms and KVKs, it is all about breaking the terms of service, not being caught for it, and get away with it. And there is lower end KVKs that are determined by that as well. There is people account sharing, there is people buying resources, there is people who have script and cheat in those ways too. It's just not as well talked about, and it's not as frequent as it's a much more casual environment. And because of this, we end up in the situation where, again, the accomplishments means less. The win and loss of cheating means nothing. So hopefully one day we will actually not have this problem, but until then we are also going to keep having the problem of can't beat them, because if your enemy's cheating, you lost to it, well, I feel like you either logically quit the game or you start cheating too, or you find someone who's willing to cheat for you in terms of botting for resources or things like that. And as I said, legitimate players will then leave or reduce the spending, and the cheaters will end up going up against one another. They don't want that. There is, in other games like FPS games, for example, that I play a bunch of, where people have hack servers. But frankly, if you end up versus a cheater, they will freak out. They will start insulting you. They will start, being bad-mannered. If they think you're cheating, they will start cheating themselves. And ultimately, a very toxic environment will form. And as this grows, more people join the cheaters or the exploiters or whichever you want to call it, the reporting of players become meaningless. Permabannable offenses in other games here are met with a 1 to 7 day suspension, and toxic behavior becomes normalized, is shun non-cheaters. That is basically what 2748 does, where we were given crap in AKC for not cheating, basically, in a mobile game, because apparently it's okay to cheat in mobile games because it doesn't really matter. Now, these results, basically, from all of this, is the toxic environment, decrease in player commitment, exodus of players and leadership, which frankly, we don't need more leadership to be playing. To be quitting. We need more leadership to be playing, sorry. We need them to stay because they are ultimately the driving force behind our communities. They are doing a lot of work that goes unthanked for or unpaid for. Having them leave is really, really, really bad for the game. And as a result of this, as communities die, some people will ultimately just permanently quit. They'll stop, spending, and the company ends up doing worse. Now, this is not something that happens overnight. This happens through continuous bad actions from both players and the game. And frankly, the saying of "don't hate the player, hate the game" really applies here, because they're just playing the system to gain advantages in order to win, to have a good experience over others, because you don't want to be on the receiving end of someone cheating, because that would be terrible. And the end result is Lilith Games is tagged as a fraudulent company, which frankly, I think they should be. They have done absolutely minimal efforts to show that they care about the community and that breaking the terms of service is a no-go. There is people who might end up running several farm accounts, whether that be through multi-boxing or through, which is against terms of service, or running it on just one device. If they run too many farm accounts, they'll get banned for it. And they will not be banned like a day, like cheaters who get caught cheating do. No, they'll get 365 days back. Which frankly, if you are cheating and you're scripting within a game and the company detects that, that should be at least a year ban, if not a permanent ban. But no, we don't do that here. And this goes back to also the company's revenue going down because of their chargebacks that people will be doing. And that is my recommendation moving forward with dealing with this. If somebody runs into cheaters and they have their community die, they want to quit, my recommendation is charge back as much money as you can, or sell your account, cash out, and don't look back. Because frankly, if the company doesn't care about its community and wants to ban people who are bad actors, then don't care about hurting their margins. They deserve the revenue loss, they deserve the bad reputation, and if enough people do it, companies won't be willing to have money go their way. I think PayPal has had examples where they're basically not willing to spend money to game companies who have had too many chargebacks. And I'm pretty sure credit card companies and things like that will also do the same. So to summarize this, I had some help from a Good Kingdom mate of mine, where basically described this, where Rise of Kingdoms has been a game where players willing to spend time and effort could find like-minded people to build kingdoms, where strategy, hard work, and teamwork were the keys to success in KVK. Also spending, but that's part of it. The part of the game that keeps most players engaged long term. However, an increase of the use of bots, RSS selling, and account piloting has led many to question whether it's worthwhile to continue playing, especially as it becomes more clear that Lilith is unwilling to take unnecessary actions to curb these problems and take actions against those that employ them to gain advantages in the game. And this is my stance on it as well. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. This is something that's going to slowly creep into the community and become such a big tumor that eventually it's going to burst. You're gonna have people drop off. You're gonna have people not feel it being worth it, and gonna sit there with an empty kingdom or an empty Discord one day and look back, being like, "Wow, we had some good times, but no more." And I also want to throw in a bit of a conclusion to everything, because I'm not promoting you do this. I'm not saying you should start cheating. This is a pros and cons discussion a little bit, but I can see where people are coming from. With this conclusion, it's gonna be a bunch of text. Bear with me, because I think it's so relevant. It's a little bit of a continuation, the conclusion, summary, I guess, but also, moving forward. For a lot of players, ROK has become a community where it is the other players in the game that keeps them coming back every day, fighting and farming and competing in events. Nothing brings down a community more quickly and more completely than cheating. No one wants to put effort into something where they have no chance of success against unbeatable opponents or using the cheats and money to succeed. This is even more true for players that are spending money on the legal bundles offered in the game, putting money in the pockets of the very content managers to turn a blind eye to the people gaining an unfair advantage just because they spend more money or enough to where supports turn a blind eye due to internal company policies allowing it. Focusing on big spenders while ignoring their misdeeds is a short-sighted business practice that will put money in their pockets today, but ultimately bring a quicker death to the game that had the potential to keep players long-term. This will only happen if Liv does not have the balls to enforce their own rules, regardless of how much these cheaters spend. Because that is also a part of the problem, in terms of, if you reprimand a cheater too much that has spent a bunch of money, they might stop spending completely. I'm not saying that justifies Lilith's decision to not address this, but I think there is ways to address cheaters in a way that stops them from continuing cheating but still keeps them involved in the game. Whether that be temporary suspensions or just removing the resources that are obviously bought, or have their accounts be locked down whilst, because they have been, on gem botting, which, by the way, they don't remove the gems that people cheat for. So if you are botting gems, you don't have your gems removed, meaning worst you get is a day or two suspension. In those cases that we have seen, which is documented in the Excel sheet that I will link in the description, and you can continue cheating. You might end up, if you get caught too many times within a short period of time, have a 7-day suspension. That's the longest I think we saw somebody get from 2748. And I doubt they stopped cheating, because they continued doing it whilst in KVK towards the end of KVK. And I think the reason why they don't want to remove the gems from people's accounts if they make an estimate or figure out that somebody is cheating is because if you go into negative in terms of gems, you cannot send your troops out of the city. You can't play the game. Meaning, if you go minus 200k gems because you cheated 200k gems, there's no way other than spending it to get that back, right? Well, it seems like the company doesn't want to do that, so they'll let you keep the gems but suspend you temporarily. So I'm not saying you should cheat. I think cheating is scummy, and I think cheaters that do cheat, they deserve a lot of the shit that is thrown their way. But some people can apparently do it and get away with it. So think twice before you continue playing this game, but also when you do report players in this game, I think you should have overwhelming evidence of them cheating and confront support non-stop. Preferably do what is the most harmful to your opponent and confront support about it right before pass openings, so that they have a suspension when they go into a zone 5 fight, when they have Kingsland. Just get their asses banned as hard and as quick as possible, and if they do get unbanned, be on them like a hawk to keep the game fair and square, or find a new game to maybe play with your friends in your community. Because ultimately, nobody likes going up against cheaters, And if you're not cheating yourself, you end up feeling powerless when supporters looks the other way, or give them a slap on the wrist and say, don't do that. Alright, that's all for me today, and let me know what you think about this topic in the comments, and stay safe out there, and don't cheat.